The year 1973 was a turning point in America, as many of you know. The Supreme Court decision called Roe versus Wade occurred, essentially legalizing abortion. Essentially legalizing it in all 50 states throughout the entire 9 months of pregnancy for all practical purposes. January 22, 1973. A watershed moment in American history. But something else happened in 1973. The founding of a non-sectarian, non-partisan organization that now has 3,000 chapters in 50 states and the District of Columbia. I'm referring to the National Right to Life Committee. The best recognized and most potent force in the pro-life movement in America. Dr. John, board member and president of the National Right to Life Committee, and the president of the International Right to Life Federation. A man whose tireless war against the evil of abortion and the taking of the life of the unborn has been recognized by the national media, and I've flipped on my television I don't know how many times, and I'm not a great television watcher, but whenever this issue has come up, there he is on McNeil Blair or 60 Minutes or Donahue or Geraldo or Good Morning America or the Today Show or the Evening News, representing those of us who believe in the fight for life. A man I deeply respect and admire. And Dr. Wilkie, thank you so much for taking time to talk about this issue after all these years of winning some and losing some. Where do you think we are today? Are we back with the momentum on our side, or is it still very much an uphill battle?
Well, Bob, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be with you again. It always has been, and I do appreciate the contribution that you've continued to make in this field. If we had more Bob Larsons around, I think we'd be further down the road on this.
Thank you.
But in any case, well, let's see. If we're to take a long look at this, let's say from 1973 till about 1980, it was pretty tough sledding. What we were doing then was we had an antagonistic administration, President Carter, most of that time. None of us got inside the White House doors. We had pro-abortion majorities most everywhere. And basically, we were training the officer corps of the pro-life movement, slowly learning how to teach this, slowly making converts, and very seldom do people convert back. As long as they're not politicians, they stay with us full time. And then one of the turning points was 1980. President Reagan was elected, and we began to feel the impact of people like Francis Schaeffer, who had been out there a bit earlier rallying Christian people to get involved. We had always had Catholics on our side, and bless them, but I'm afraid we have to say most evangelical and fundamentalist Christians were sort of disinterested in this. But in any case, partly through Schaeffer and then others, Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson and yourself and so many others, this question came to the fore. And God bless our Christian broadcasting in the United States. It just sets us completely apart from almost every other nation in the world. Through the Christian broadcasting media, the issue of abortion sort of bobbed to the top, if you please, and it's remained there ever since. What with the help we had from Reagan and the sweep we had in 1980, which gave us a pro-life Senate to match a pro-life House, our movement then moved forward. And from 1980 until just a year ago, the Webster decision of the summer of '89, I would say that we were on a period of sustained growth at almost every level and every measurement. We were growing in numbers of chapters, in the size and influence of them. We were consistently biting off one piece after another at the national level, stopping funding for this, for that, and for that. Yes, we still had abortion on demand until birth. But we couldn't do anything about that because that was a constitutional decision, and the only way to reverse that was a human life amendment, and we didn't have the strength for that or to have the court reverse itself. But a lot of people didn't realize that that was slowly underway. as Reagan slowly began replacing judges. And of course, that's right in the forefront this summer with the resignation of Brennan and the nomination of a new justice here.
Mm-hmm.
So what we had then was a slow change in the composition of the court, and that then finally came to fruition in Webster in July of '89.
Now let's talk about the significance that decision had particularly. What, in terms of all the ramifications, and there have been, of course, a number of following cases, the Minnesota case, Pennsylvania case, and the Louisiana case, a lot of things that have been the fallout of that. But what was the most single important issue in the Webster decision? And I'm thinking in terms of the people out there who may not have the legal lines clearly drawn in their minds. What came out of that turned the tide?
Well, understand the Roe versus Wade decision, the one back in '73, established an absolute constitutional right for the woman to abort her little kid. And there was no limitation of that right in any way. As further decisions were made and that same court elaborated on them, they said, we don't care if the little one's viable, you can still kill him. No, husbands have no rights to interfere. No, parents don't have to have any right to consent to this for a minor daughter. In fact, they don't even have to be told. No, a 24-hour waiting period is unconstitutional. No, fetal disposal, humane disposal of fetal remains, unconstitutional. No, you can't have mandatory informed consent. That's unconstitutional. It got almost ridiculous by the time the last one of the majority of the old court was finally handed down about 4 years ago. If you can imagine them saying that to require informed consent of the woman infringed on her constitutional right, and it was not allowed. So what that did was say the right of a woman to an abortion was absolute. There was no restriction at all. The only restriction was that she had to request, that she had to find a licensed physician who would do it, and that physician, abortionist, would have to complete the job before the baby left the womb. So if we take an extreme, but it was, in fact, and still is legal in every state, you could have a skin specialist who's not trained in this do an abortion in the 9th month of pregnancy because this is a girl and they want a boy. And that was legal in every state. I'm not saying that happened, but I am saying that if that had happened, that particular abortionist could not have been convicted of a crime.
Now, I want to jump in on you here because I'd like to bring something into focus real quickly. You've opened a can of worms I was going to get into later. Let's get into it right now. In the minds of many people, abortion is a very single-focused issue. But as you've already alluded to, there are spin-off issues here, and you and the National Right to Life Committee are not just dealing with the issue of to abort or not to abort. You're dealing with the issues of abortion as a means of birth control, of sex selection abortions, of whether or not women have accurate information, of whether fathers' rights are entertained, the issue of minors, government-sponsored facilities being used, Medicaid, Medicare funding, and so on. There are a whole series of issues. Let's go down through these, can we? And just give me a quick little capsule summary, because there's so much I want to cover here, of what the basic issue is. Let's touch, first of all, on sex selection abortions.
It's legal in all 50 states, period.
That's it?
That's it.
You mean to tell me, in America today, a woman can, and I presume this is through ultrasound, etc., if she can determine the sex of the child and she chooses a boy over a girl, vice versa, on that basis, she has the right to an abortion.
And the National Organization of Some Women will defend that right to the death.
All right. What about the issue of a woman receiving accurate information before an abortion?
At the moment, it's unconstitutional in every state.
So a woman can be lied to, the situation of fetal development can be misrepresented or absent, and
it's done routinely.
And there's no compulsion on behalf of the informing agency, which may be federally funded, to provide certain information.
Okay, now Pennsylvania's law last fall spoke briefly to that. You'll find a whole slew of laws in January and February being introduced that are going to try and require that. But prior to Webster, it was completely unconstitutional to require that.
What about the fathers now? This is one that has been really mind-boggling to me, this business of it's my body and not recognizing the genetic contribution of the father, that he has no say. And I don't think most people understand that a wife, let alone a girlfriend, correct me, can have an abortion, does not have to inform the father.
That is correct. The father has, at this moment, in all 50 states, has absolutely no rights to protect the child he's fathered in her womb. As a matter of fact, he has no right to even know about it if she doesn't want to tell him.
And what about the informed consent of the parents with regards to minors? Where does that stand?
All right. This is one that many states have passed laws on, 33 states to be exact. Most of them would inform the parents of a minor daughter living at home. Some of the laws would require the parents' consent. Now, before Webster, all of that was very mixed up because the court had said it was unconstitutional, and then they allowed it in certain cases. Well, that's been pretty well cleared up by the decisions here at the end of June in 1990, which clearly and across the board said it is constitutional to have a law in a state that does require notification of one or two parents, and the only qualification there was that if there was a question of parental abuse, one of the incest or something awful like that, that she could go to a judge, and we call this a judicial bypass. A judge could then authorize an abortion without the parents being involved in it. Now, incidentally, you haven't touched on it, but a waiting period was also unconstitutional.
Yes.
And the judgments here this summer on the Ohio and Minnesota laws, one law had a 24-hour, the other had a 48-hour waiting period, and both of those were judged constitutional. So that's been broken out now also. But prior to Webster, it was unconstitutional to require a 24-hour cooling-off period.
Time magazine recently suggested that those in the pro-life movement were appearing rather heartless by taking a position they said was somewhat hard with regards to victims of rape not being accepted from the anti-abortion agenda. I'm sure you've been called heartless before, and for you as a physician who've been in the business of healing human bodies 40 years, how many babies have you delivered?
Oh, a couple of thousand.
A couple of thousand. How do you feel being called heartless by Time magazine because the Right to Life movement apparently is not concerned about victims of rape and incest?
If you take a position that this is not a living human, that this is but a glob, and this woman has been violated, then to say that you should require or allow an abortion for rape, I guess makes some kind of logic or sense. But if you know, as we all do, that this is a living human baby from the first cell stage on, and that when you and I and everyone else listening was yet a single cell, just a fertilized egg, we were already male or female. We certainly were alive and growing. We were human, 46 human chromosomes. We sure weren't a carrot. Complete and intact. You've got a baby growing in there. Okay, now, do you kill an innocent baby for the crime of his father? Do we punish other criminals by killing their children? Why, of course not. This woman has been violated in the most ugly fashion. But understand, that is in the past. She was a subject of ugly violence. Now she is being asked to be the perpetrator of further violence against her own child. It's the rapist's child, of course, but it is also hers. And this baby is innocent. Our answer to rape is that we must love this woman. We must protect her and shelter her. We must take care of her and understand her. And she doesn't have to keep this and raise a child. There are tens of thousands of outstretched arms aching to love this child. You know, Bob, right now, abortion is legal for any reason at all, and only half of the women who become pregnant from rape elect abortion.
Really?
And if you ask them what their chief complaint is, why, they say that their chief complaint is how people, if we were to quit ridiculing this rape victim, if we were to love her, understand her, help her, be far fewer would want to abort. Incidentally, while we're on the subject, you know that rape pregnancy is incredibly rare. There's probably no more than a couple of hundred assault rape pregnancies in the whole United States in a year.
At the time you and I are days ago, a 15-year-old girl had become pregnant by her boyfriend. We have something called the Hope Line, which is a national number that people can call, accessing a data computer bank of listing helping individuals and organizations involving a number of areas of human trauma. This 15-year-old girl called our Hope Line that she had heard us promoting on the air, and we were able to put her in touch locally with a birthright organization that reached out to her and convinced her to keep that child. And she came back on the air a couple of days later thanking us. She's 4 months pregnant. She had scheduled the abortion. And because her father listens to our show, she happened to hear the number, called it. We put her in touch with this person. A life was saved. It seemed so simple. And she was so thrilled and overjoyed to know that there would be supportive people who would help her through this, people that cared. I mean, what I'm trying to say, Dr. Wilkie, is that it was so simple, so easy for us to reach out and save the life of this little baby and save this girl incredible trauma. With so many, I'm convinced, young women out there responding so easily to so much love and concern that we expressed to her in saving the life of this baby. Why then are so many other young girls taking the lives of their children? Do they not know that love and support is available?
They do not know, Bob, and they'll never be told inside of the Planned Parenthood abortion mill. You know, and I think many of us know, that if 100 girls walk into a Planned Parenthood abortion chamber, 99 will get aborted, and the other would be sent home because she had a fever. If you have 100 girls walk into a problem pregnancy center, which is similar to what you mentioned here, the birthright, wanting an abortion, mistaking it for an abortion clinic, and they're willing to stay and watch a half-hour videotape, 4 out of 5 will change their mind and carry their babies to term.
I saw on today's show recently some pictures that are appearing in Life magazine, now the most dramatic early pictures of conception and onward. It seems inconceivable to me, with this kind of dramatic evidence continually coming forward, that the anti-life people can have much ammunition left to defend their position. And even the interviewer that I saw on the Today Show was stunned to see these pictures of life in the womb. Are the advances of science in the ability for a camera to peek inside and see the development of the unborn child going to help to turn back the tide?
Oh, no question about it, Bob. They used to ask me 10 and 15 years ago, what would happen if we discover a pill that caused an abortion? And then everybody had early abortions like, well, the French pill maybe. And you wouldn't be able to show those bloody fetuses and so forth. Boy, would that take the wind out of your sails. You really wouldn't have any arguments anymore. Well, there might have been some truth to that 15 years ago. But just exactly what you have said, those are some pretty terrific pictures. Went on the stands in early July. Another thing is ultrasound. How many people listening haven't watched on ultrasound or been told by their neighbor, their daughter, whoever, that this woman goes into the hospital, she's only missed her second period or another week or two maybe, looks at ultrasound and sees this little kid moving around in there, jumping, sucking his thumb, and easily, of course, seeing and listening to the little baby's heartbeat. Well, you know, we didn't know those things 20 years ago. We only began to have this experimentally about maybe 10. Now it's the common experience of the ordinary gal on the street to know that there is a heart beating, let's say 1 week after she's missed her period, and sees it on the ultrasound. And when people do that, they rarely abort babies they see on ultrasound.
Last year, the Los Angeles Times did a poll. 61% of the people interviewed said abortion is morally wrong. 57% said it was murder. But 51% said a woman should have a right to do it if she wants. Now, I want to quote that again. I want people to get it straight. 61% said it's wrong. 57% said it's murder. But then almost a complete philosophical flip-flop. 51% said a woman ought to have a right to do it. That does not make sense to me. Somehow, deductive logic is not following through here. Why?
I'll do you one better on that one, Bob.
What's going on? Explain it.
All right. Let me give you an even more remarkable example. December of '89, Worthline, he's a national pollster, respected one, asked 2 questions of the same people. They were separated by some other questions. Kept the wording now. The first question said, do you think a woman should have the right to abort? The second said, do you think unborn babies' lives ought to be protected? What do you think? Almost 60% said that the woman should have the right to abort, but almost 70% said unborn babies' lives ought to be protected. 37% of people said yes to both questions. Now, you ask, how can that be?
Yeah, what's going on here logically?
Well, it doesn't make much sense. But the point is, neither question asked about abortion in the minds of the person asked. The first question that I gave you asked about whether they thought women should have rights. And the second question I gave you asked about whether they thought unborn babies ought to have rights.
Mm-hmm.
And people answer because if you put right to abort in the question, you'll get a majority yes. Now, the Boston Globe said, should a woman have the right to abort? And a few questions later said, should a woman have the right to choose to abort? On the first question, over about 55% said yes. Second question, about 65% said yes. So putting in the word to choose picked up 10 more points, and I'll tell you, if they'd have added with your doctor's consent, you'd have picked up 10 more. So the question is biased. And yet, have you ever seen, have any of our listeners ever seen, a national poll that purported to ask about the abortion opinion that said, do you think unborn babies' lives ought to be protected?
Mm-hmm.
You never get that. The question is always worded, should a woman have the right to choose? Well, that one is biased. It leads the answer. Yeah, the second one is too. The only way to ask is to do a question that says, for what reasons do you think abortion should be permitted?
Mm-hmm.
Then you get an answer. Then you get 90% in favor or more if the woman's life is threatened. You get a 75% yes on rape and incest.
Mm-hmm.
You get about a 65% yes on severe fetal handicap. But those only make up 1% of all abortions. Now you ask, the woman is not married? 40% approval. 60 disapprove. The woman has too many children already, or she doesn't have enough money? That's down in the late 30s. Almost 2/3 disapprove. The woman wants to finish school. Only 1 in 4 approves there. Used as a method of birth control, only 1 in 10 approve. Used for sex selection, you only get 1% approval. Those social and economic and birth control reasons make up almost 99% of all abortions done, and a majority of the people in this nation disapprove of 99% of all abortions done.
So I hear you suggesting that in general the body politic is pretty sensible about this issue if they see it framed properly and they're not having their perception skewed by these emotional exceptional circumstances which don't represent the majority of abortions.
That's right. And assuming that the question is phrased in a way that doesn't lead the answer.
I want to talk about RU 486. This situation will not die. This is the French abortion pill. It's gotten the endorsement of the American Medical Association. I saw an article in which it was suggested, and you want to talk about convoluted logic, that for a researcher and doctor not to fight for this pill, this abortive pill, was unethical. It was unethical for them if they knew a pill existed that could make abortion easier, that they would be morally wrong to capitulate to people like you. And I found that absolutely amazing. It was morally wrong not to fight the Right to Life Committee. It was unethical not to put this on the market. It was unethical for a company not to manufacture it.
Well, they can use whatever words they want, but let me paraphrase. Let me flip back 50 years. We're in Nazi Germany. They've been killing all these Jews, but my goodness, what a messy thing this is. Some are shot, some are use carbon monoxide. They're starving some to death. And now this company, IG Farben, comes up with a magic pill. It's called Cyclone D. You put everybody in a shower, and you drop this pill in the water, and pretty soon they're all dead, real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me for paraphrasing, but these same people who said what you just said, if they lived 50 years ago, they could stand back there and they could say, look, it's unethical not to use this method of killing Jews. The other one is not as safe. The other one is more painful, and this is quick and easy and efficient. And if you people don't use it, you're not ethical.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, I understand the logic. Very interesting.
That's exactly what this person's doing. This person is out of his tree. And, of course, they're making some kind of propaganda. I presume some people would listen to that. More's the pity.
This is the end of Side 1. Please turn the cassette over at this point for the continuation of the message on Side 2.
What is likely to be the state of this? I know so far your lobbying efforts, your threats of boycotts, the pressure you've been able to bring to bear in regards to RU 486, the abortion pill, has been, thank God, fairly successful. Is there going to become a point beyond which you fear that public opinion is going to demand a quick, cheap, easy abortion pill, that you may not be able to thwart it?
Well, first of all, it's not cheap. It costs $40. The follow-up shot costs $40 or $50 more. It takes 4 visits to the doctor, and it's not a bit cheaper than a single visit to an abortion mill. And so it's not cheap. Secondly, it's not safe. We know of 2 women who barely almost died from heart attacks from the pill. We know that in third world countries, there'll be thousands of women die from the pill from uncontrolled bleeding, and they won't have the means to stop it that we do here. We know that it has no other proven function. It's not a contraceptive. It's not at this point about to cure breast cancer. Nobody's proven any of that. The only thing that it's proven to do is to kill an unborn baby whose heart has already begun to beat, and do that within the 6 weeks after she's missed her first period. That's its only function. We also know that in women who take the pill, who fail to abort, who change their mind and then go on to deliver, or in third world countries, that's going to be almost 1 out of 4, because they don't have the expensive shot, much less the syringe to even give it in, or a doctor to give it.
Mm-hmm.
Those who take a pill, fail to abort, and go on to term will deliver babies that will be severely deformed. And the deformity will be the same kind of deformity as with thalidomide. You're going to have tragic little children with a rudimentary hand growing out of a shoulder or something like that. You're going to have these little children with heart defects and blind and all kinds of awful things because you gave them a powerful, poisonous steroid right at the time when the organs and the limbs were forming. Yes, it killed most of them, but it didn't kill them all. And those who survive and are carried to term, and some will be, are going to be deformed. There's another mechanism, and that is that this in the body releases what the biochemists call a free radical, which can combine with and damage DNA the genetic building blocks of our body, and through that mechanism cause fetal deformity at birth, conceivably even cause cancer 20 years later, as the DES drug did in the 50s that we used back then for miscarriages. It could even cause cancer in women. We don't know that it wouldn't. Oh, this pill is a killer, but it's not just, it's not quick and easy and simple. This thing is what we've called a human pesticide, which could be a chemical time bomb for the children who survive.
Let's talk about the political arena for a moment. Governor Andrus of Idaho vetoed what would have been the USA's toughest state law limiting abortions. There are some politicians who are refusing, at least in the Republican ranks, to abide by the party platform, and there are suggestions that modified position will help them be elected, because there have been some setbacks in places like Virginia and so on, where strong pro-life politicians, avowedly and publicly so, were defeated. There are some in the media suggesting that as far as the political stance is concerned, that you're not winning the war there, that more and more politicians are breaking ranks, particularly in the Republican Party, that they're looking for a modified, more moderate approach to this subject. Are you, to any extent, losing the war politically?
They wish. Bob, if there's ever been whistling in the dark, it's been the media's attempt to convince the nation that the pro-aborts are winning and that the tide has turned. Yes, we did lose two prominent elections in their mind last fall. One was in New Jersey, and we didn't lose that at all. We weren't even in the race. Both sides were pro-abortion. It was a complete concoction by the pro-life, pro-abortion press, and then they labeled us as loser. The Virginia thing, we would have won if our guy had fought back. But nevertheless, that did us harm, and some politicians jumped ship and changed sides. But since the first of the year, the tide has been rolling in our direction, and it has reached tremendous proportions here. Just in the last month to 6 weeks, I could itemize 11 major pro-life victories and almost not a single pro-abortion one. Let me just tick them off.
All right.
1, 2, 3 Supreme Court decisions the end of June, and we won them all. 4, federal court decision in Fosher versus Federal Election Commission. What this did was vindicate our right to distribute voter guides criticizing federal candidates on abortion. 5, the Louisiana bill, passing or passed, there's no question that will be passed. 6, Michigan, right to life, turned in far more signatures than were needed to begin the process to reverse a governor's veto of their parental notification bill. That's a given at this point. It's just going to take some time. 7, Oregon turned in enough signatures to place a parental notification and a restrictive abortion law on the ballot in November. 8, Missouri's pro-abortion people tried to get a pro-abortion initiative to amend the state constitution. They failed for lack of signatures. 9, a significant turnaround, a major victory in the House of Representatives in middle July, specifically deleting International Planned Parenthood and the United Nations Fund for Population Activity from a Romanian foreign aid family planning bill. 10, we passed the Hyde Amendment without change. Last fall, we lost it. It was changed, and we had to have Bush rescue it with a veto. And finally, the resignation of Justice Brennan and all that entails. During this time, the pro-aborts haven't won a darn thing. They had the AMA endorse the pill. National Education Association actually tried for the first time to reverse their pro-abortion position. They didn't. But if those are two sops to them, those were both pro-abortion organizations that have shamelessly lobbied for the destruction of the very people they ought to be taking care of.
What about Bush? There are some people who are saying that he talks a good talk, but he doesn't walk the walk. He has not been as fervent in his battle for this as he should have been.
That's simply not true. We had a veto threat here just a couple of weeks ago on this very bill I've mentioned for foreign aid. As a matter of fact, we had lost an equivalent bill last November. right at the bottom when we had had that Virginia race and so forth. And almost 50 congressmen deserted us and went to the other side. And for the first time in 10 years, we lost a vote in the House of Representatives. Then we lost the D.C. Appropriations Bill. And then we lost the Hyde Amendment, 3 in a row. Bush vetoed all 3, and they couldn't override his veto. He saved our bills. This past month, we had much the equivalent on the foreign aid. We had a letter from Bush saying that if Planned Parenthood was in there, he'd veto it. As a matter of fact, we won by almost 30 votes. We reversed the losses of last fall. Very significant. We're back where we were before Webster.
One of the things that's, I know, very dear to your heart is a concern to expand the pro-life movement internationally, and you recently had an opportunity to be in East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and so on. The news headlines have focused on places like Romania, where previous to the deposing of the dictator there, abortion was outlawed because there was an attempt to just manufacture babies to beef up the population, and then freedom came, and ironically, abortion became legal. We hear a lot about that one, where it seems ironic to us that freedom came and abortion became legal. What is, in general, the overview? Is Romania an exception? What's going on in Eastern Europe as the walls of communism are crumbling?
East Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary are one case. Romania is totally unique and different. There is no nation in the world that's like Hungary. In the first 3 that I've mentioned, by and large, there is a major move against abortion. Abortion came with the communist masters 40 years ago. They hate the communists and everything associated with them. Now, the press has been hyping that the East German women want abortion, but that's like our press here. The average person over there doesn't particularly want it, and they identify it with communism, and now that communism is being thrown away, they want to protect their babies again. The other big thing in those countries is that this was a very bleak existence in which to raise children. There wasn't much reason to have a large family. Now they have hope again, and you watch. We're going to get some restrictive laws on abortion in Eastern Europe, and then there's Romania. First of all, he wasn't pro-life, of course. He outlawed abortion unless you had 4 kids. Then you could have all the abortions you wanted. Mm-hmm. He forbade the use of contraceptives. He appropriated all of the eggs, and children literally starved to death from protein malnutrition. That country is a country of grinding poverty. We had a social worker from India while we were over there look at us with her deep brown eyes and say, "Oh, Dr. and Mrs. Wilkie, we don't have anything nearly this bad in India."
My.
She's talking about the orphanages, where they put 2 and 3 naked little babies in a crib with no linens, where they don't feed them enough, where the room is cold, where they have sores on their skin. I mean, it's absolutely atrocious. Who would want to bring a baby into that world? And so right now, they're still just that poor. I wouldn't condone abortion. As a matter of fact, I recoiled in horror when they took us through the university hospital where they're doing 60 of them in a morning and looked at the equipment. It was the kind of equipment my grandfather had at the turn of the century. An operating room with only 3 syringes in it, which they keep using. Old-fashioned metal ones that I keep as souvenirs from my grandfather, who was a physician way back then.
My word.
The doctors not gowned. Suction machines not working. It was illegal back alley abortion in a university medical center. No, what we have to do to the people in Romania is love them, send them help them rebuild that shattered country that they live in, clean up the air, get food to them. Gee, we stayed at one place that they called a villa. So proud to put us, the guests, up here. Well, it was about a $250 a month apartment, if you want to know. She said, "Do you want eggs for breakfast?" We said, "Eggs? Gee, we heard you had trouble with eggs." "Oh," she said, "we haven't had them in years." But somebody came in from Austria the other day, and he thought you'd like eggs, and so he gave me 3.
Oh, my.
She said, when our children were little, we were educated, she said, and we knew that their little brains needed protein to develop right. So she said, whenever we had protein food, my husband and I would feed it to the children, and we would eat starch such as we could. But she said, most people don't know that. And these little children have protein malnutrition, and they're mentally retarded because of the diet. Bob, it's an absolute tragedy over there. And for us to go over there and say you shouldn't abort right now just isn't where it is. We're going to start an educational campaign. We're sending materials over so that they learn about fetal development and learn about the bad effects of abortion. But with it, we're going to send them help for their and food and clothes, and hopefully they can get some industry going that will be worthwhile, and they'll come around. Don't worry about that.
The agenda of a number of national organizations, you mentioned the National Education Association. I know your, of course, excellent publication that I receive bi-weekly and read, the National Right to Life News, has recently highlighted the AFL-CIO. There are some people in organizations sticking their noses into this abortion debate. They don't have anything to do with abortion. I mean, we're talking labor unions, we're talking about educational associations, and so on. Why is it that so many of these kinds of organizations feel a compulsion to take a stand on this kind of an issue?
You know, it's interesting, Bob. Let me tell you a story. I was at a college sometime back in a debate, and my opponent really wasn't very good. And there was no question about who won the debate. I did it hands down. The lady came up to me afterwards who had set the thing up, one of the college employees. She was quite profuse in her praising the fact that I had won the abortion. She said, you answered every question. She said, this was an amazing performance. That lady was utterly incompetent. And so I knew this lady was pro-abortion. She had told me that ahead of time. So I said, so I answered all the questions. She said, absolutely every one. I said, do you have any questions left? Nope. I said, good. Have I changed your mind? Me? Oh, my, no. I'm still pro-choice.
Why?
There's lots of those people out there, Bob. Let me tell you. You and I are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
At base, we start from a belief. It basically is this. Jesus Christ is God.
Mm-hmm.
We point our lives out from that starting point. That doesn't have to be proven to us. We believe.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else flows from that. You'd share that with me.
That's right.
Okay? The radical pro-abortion feminist also has a basic belief. We use the old Latin word credo. I believe. Yes. Woman must have this right. That's a given. You don't have to prove that, Bob. You stupid people, don't you understand? Woman must have this right. That's a given. That's a point of departure. Well, yeah, I know maybe it is a baby, but that doesn't matter. We still need it. Well, I know it doesn't cause unwanted, doesn't solve unwanted babies, but we still need it. Well, yeah, I don't care what you say. We still, you know, I was troubled by this, and yet it's where it is. Some people are touched by being pregnant, but I asked a very holy clergyman here some time back. I said, what do we do here, Pastor? I said, how do we get to these people? He pointed me to Luke, and I don't recall now, but I could pick it out. Jesus was casting out devils, taught his apostles, and they were doing pretty good at it until they came to these recalcitrant devils, and they wouldn't cast out. They went back to Jesus, and they said, and I'm paraphrasing, these are tough nuts. Lord, how do we get rid of these? And he said, yes, they are tough nuts. There's only one answer. You know it, Bob. Fasting and prayer. And I'm sure that's the only way. We have to touch hearts. And, you know, mysterious are the ways of the Lord. We have to pray for these people.
I think maybe what you've touched on here is the truth This is a legislative battle. It is a moral battle. It is an ethical battle. It's a philosophical battle. But ultimately, it is a spiritual battle because life is spiritual. And if one does not believe that at the first cause of human life is the creation of that life by God breathing into it existence, then from that point on, they are willing to accept all types of options. And I know that your organization is fighting things like infanticide and euthanasia. And I know you have a deep concern about this right to die movement in America. There is either a fundamental assumption about the sacredness of life because it is not something that occurs randomly by chance, but it occurs by divine design, that only God can give life and only God has the right to take it away. It seems like maybe that's the fundamental issue, that it ultimately comes back to a spiritual question of whether or not we believe life comes from an outside sovereign source rather than the genetic accident of human nature.
It's, in a way, in our pluralistic secular society, a rather almost dangerous thing to lean on too much.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we do, then all those secularists out there, they say, oh, that's fine for Larson and Wilkie, because that's what they believe, but I believe something else. And so you must let me act according to my own conscience, and don't you force your morality on me. And so I believe that talking as you and I are and sharing, what we're doing is motivating each other and hopefully those who are listening. But when we go into the marketplace in America, we cannot only say it's the wish of the Lord to have this done, because that one isn't going to sell.
I agree.
Not with enough people.
Mm-hmm.
Then we take a different tack, which is basically where it is.
Mm-hmm.
We ask two questions. We say, what is this that grows inside of the woman? And the answer to that is present in every medical school library in the world. This is a living human from the first cell stage, and that livingness and humanness is continuous whether inside or outside of the womb until that living human dies. This is human life. Then we ask a second question. Should there be equal protection under the law for all living humans? And we call that the question of human rights or civil rights. And we make laws to protect civil rights. And so that's where that is. We're talking about human rights. And in our civil society, we respect human rights. And we not only respect them, we protect them. And we protect them by law.
Dr. Wilkie, as we come to the close of our conversation here, I have to tell you, I've long admired you, and the thing I find so remarkable, and I think the people who have been listening to us in the last few moments will agree with me, is the articulateness and the fervency with which you speak. You do hundreds, literally hundreds of radio and television appearances, and yet I sense in your voice not a weariness in well-doing, but you're talking to me today with the same fervency, the same zeal, the same deep abiding concern as I've heard you talk to me on every occasion I've ever talked to you, and as I've heard you talk whether I flipped on my TV and saw you on an entertainment show or a news broadcast. Even now, I sense a controlled, quiet confidence of fervency for the listener out there who maybe has been fighting this fight and waging this war on behalf of life in their local community and in their local Right to Life organization. Maybe gets a little frustrated. Please tell me, Dr. Wilkie, where are you getting this energy and enthusiasm from?
Oh, I guess it's partly a gift, Bob. It tends to come naturally. A great deal of it is the nourishment that both Barbara and I share in a tremendously good marriage. The Lord's been good to us. We've never had to want. My voice is a gift of the Lord. It's apparently one that works on radio.
Very well.
It happens to be there. I don't know. But I will tell you this, every time is the first time.
Dr. Wilkie, statistically, across the board, out of all the people that are listening to us right now, there's not just one. There are many young women who are pregnant this moment, just like that 15-year-old young woman, Debbie, I mentioned a little earlier, who happened to be listening to me on the air just a few days ago. They've just found out they're pregnant. They haven't told their parents yet. They don't know what to do. A boyfriend, an associate, a friend, someone may be saying, have an abortion. They're agonizing. Sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours, they're going to make a decision one way or another whether or not to have an abortion. From your heart, what is it that you want that young woman to know?
Don't do anything in haste. Don't hurry up and do anything. Think about it for a while before you move. Haste makes waste. Boy, does it ever in this case. Then, confide in those who love you the most. Almost certainly this will be your parents. Occasionally it may not be. But then it has to be someone else, a pastor, somebody who you can confide in. Then what you must do is be sure you're pregnant. I certainly wouldn't trust the abortion chamber. They abort women who are not pregnant, as long as you bring money in. You want to be examined by a competent physician and be sure you are pregnant. Then the next thing is you must learn what is inside of you. You're going to find out later. No point in hiding from it. It's there. Won't go away. Find out through your local Right to Life group or your crisis pregnancy center, your church, wherever. They will have some information on this. And do look at beautiful, accurate photographs of developing babies in the womb at your stage. Learn what you're carrying. Learn a little something about what abortion is. If you're going to go through it, you ought to know. Heavens, if I'm a surgeon and I'm going to tell you I'm going to do this or that to you, you'd want to know all the details. Find out the details, but not from the abortionist. Abortions in abortion mills are sold. It's a cold business. You walk in there, they'll abort you. That's the last place you want to go. You may end up there, but don't walk in there the first time. Then, if you're a praying gal, by cracky pray. Pray alone and pray with somebody else. Think long and hard. And then ask yourself, why is it that I am so concerned, so afraid? And those will be real reasons. I have never yet seen a convenience abortion, let me tell you. They're all serious. But your parents will throw you out. They won't allow you home. Okay? The Crisis Pregnancy Center will find a shepherding home for you. You're going to drop out of school? Don't necessarily think so. We can make arrangements to keep you there, if not there, another school, and keep you abreast. Whatever your problem is, there is an answer to it, believe me. Think long and hard, and then you know what I think. I just don't think mothers ought to kill their own babies. But I'm not going to lay a guilt trip on you. I'm going to say you must make your own decision in this culture, but don't let anybody else rush you into it. Do all of the things I've told you first, then make your decision.
I have the feeling, Dr. Wilkie, those words of the last few moments have saved a lot of lives, and I thank you very much for joining me today.
Been a real pleasure, Bob.
This is the end of the message. For further information regarding other topics available on cassette and in printed form, write Compassion Connection, Box 36C, Denver, Colorado, 80236.